And I know you're not seeing that.
Reflection is that process of allowing the person that you're coaching.
My apologies. Okay, can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Reflection is that process of allowing the person that you're coaching to step back and think about what it is that they know, think about why or why not something is happening the way they want it to, and then for them to take the lead in thinking about what their other ideas are. I like to say reflection is really demonstrating respect for the person that you're coaching.
So what's the essence of what you want kids to be doing maybe differently?
I want them to be a little more independent.
Okay. So have you noticed a difference between what was happening, say, in September and now? I think the reflection piece has been the most exciting piece for a lot of people I've worked with. We forget what the intent of what we're doing is, and we get bogged down maybe in a rule or two. So I really want people to let go of getting bogged down in rules and thinking, why am I doing this? What's really the big idea? And can I do that big idea in a better way that there's more learning happening? What did you learn about yourself and your teaching, or did anything stand out to you? What have been some of the strategies other than modeling have you done to support their growth? If I was helping someone learn how to be a coach, I would really want them to be thoughtful about how do I facilitate someone else's reflection? What are the prompts I would say? How do I listen? How do I nudge? So it's all about having someone to get into that analyzing place.
The reflection is important because it really affords the coachee or the educator an opportunity to gain different perspectives and to really think deeply about how the way that they do their work really can make an impact in the life of children. Was there something that you think that we could have done differently? Where else can you use open-ended questions, you think?
That really is what distinguishes coaching from consultation. And I'm not thinking about so I can give feedback. I'm thinking, how can I support them in problem solving? And then together we can figure out what those answers might be.
We've found that there are 4 different types of questions that coaches do. You ask someone to reflect, you're really open to the possibilities. I am wide open to how they're going to respond to the question. I'm not trying to lead them into a certain direction or lead them to a certain decision. We call that coaxing, not coaching.
This is one of the things that I think was hardest for me to get used to. I was much more comfortable with giving instruction. So what do we think about how she's sitting on this seat? Is this typical? Does this make sense? Is this something that would work for you guys? It makes such a big difference when I can say to a parent, how does that compare? How does that feel? How much are you doing? It lets me know, number one, that a parent understands what they're working on and how what they've done has made a difference for the child. I think at the end of the day, having parents realize they own it. My hands aren't magic. I have ideas, but they have the magic.
So we thought that was a pretty good kind of a basis for what our goals are. So the first thing we were kind of thinking about was, so figuring out what the goal of reflection is and what it actually means. So the goal, we want the parents to problem solve. We want the parents to come up with ideas for what they can do with their kid. We want the parents to be really invested in the ideas. So we help guide them in coming up with thoughts and plans and strategies that they feel like can be helpful for them on a day-to-day basis. And so then I wondered, so kind of what does it mean? And I was really struggling with doing this because I don't feel like I'm super proficient in this either. So I was watching the news the other night and I heard they were talking about the scenario where you're trying to talk to people who you don't agree with, which is what we're all having to do right now, is talk to people we don't agree with. So the man had said a couple of times, what we're doing is listening to learn. And I thought, yeah, so that's what we're doing as providers. We're listening to the families to learn what their priorities are and then learn to, figure out what they feel like is going to be helpful in their day. So I feel like that was helpful for me to kind of think about when I'm working with families, what are we actually doing here? And the first step is listening to learn. And some ways we can do that within a session would be to ask some questions and make a few statements that will help lead us on that path. And one of them is that repeating what a family is saying. So you hear a family say something and then you say, I heard you tell Johnny, say that you want Johnny to be able to sit at the table, and then follow that up with, did I hear you correctly? And when we do that and we make a pause, then that gives us time to reflect on whether or not we heard them right. And it gives the family an opportunity to either tell us, yeah, that's what you heard and that was correct, or no, that's not really what I said and let me repeat it. And then if there's other people in the room, it gives everybody kind of a chance to just sit back and be reflective on the conversation that is about to happen. And another pretty, good statement that we can make about that is, tell me more about something. So I feel like a lot of us will start a session and we walk in and we sit down and we're like, okay, how's it going? We stop. And then we wait for somebody to answer. And so that's socially acceptable. Those are good social graces that you walk in the door and you kind of, you get your relationship made and you're asking them how it's going. And if you mean that in the broader context of, how's your family, what's going on in your life, just generally, that's great. But in order to get to kind of the root of reflection, we need to be a little bit more specific. So go back to what the goal, or like what you talked about last time, or go back to the goal that's written in the IFSP. And then you can just say, tell me more about maybe how is he coming to the table for mealtime? Or how does he ask for help when he's sitting at the table? Something super specific that you can then, that has been discussed in the past, hopefully, and they talked about that as being something that was important to them, and you can review it, and then that can kind of guide your conversation. We do a lot of awareness questions without really jumping to the analysis or the alternative or kind of the action statements. And those deeper questions, Mary Ellen's going to go over those a little bit more later, but those deeper questions can really help a family think about how they can get to what their goal is. And so this morning I was with Libby and we were in a visit, and the statement that he had made in that video was to be really careful about coaxing versus coaching. And I feel like I have realized in the past week, since we've been kind of looking at this, that I do a whole lot of coaxing. And that's like kind of turning an awareness question or an analysis question and kind of flipping it and turning it into a direct suggestion. So I catch myself a lot saying, what do you think would happen if, and then I fill in the blank with what I really kind of want them to do. And I'll say, what do you think would happen if we pulled them up to the table? Which is my goal. That's my goal, is for that kid to not be in the high chair and to be pulled up to the table. So I just kind of make it in a, a kind of awareness situation where we're thinking about ideas, and then we throw our little therapy thought in there as a zinger to get them to do what they want. So this morning I was with Libby, and we were taught, this particular kid, for whatever reason, doesn't like to eat cheese plain, but he likes pizza. So the mom was talking about how he'll put the cheese on the pizza and he'll see that the cheese is going on the pizza, and they'll put the pizza in the oven and they'll take it out and they'll eat the pizza and everything will be fine. And so he's like doing all of those actions, but he won't eat plain cheese, and he won't eat nachos, and he won't eat like other ways for the cheese to be consumed. And what I wanted to say was, what do you think would happen if we took potato chips and then we sprinkled some cheese on them and put them in the oven or in the microwave or whatever to see to see what he would do. And I paused and I thought, okay, that's not the question I need to be answering. So I just very broadly said, how do you think we could recreate that pizza scenario to help him try to eat cheese in different ways? And the dad was in the room and he said, well, we could just sprinkle the cheese on top of the tortilla chips and stick it in the microwave. I was like, yes, that's what I wanted you to say. But also they came up with it on their own. So we have to be super careful about how we're asking those questions to not turn it into a more traditional therapy session when we're just asking kind questions to see if we can get them to do what we do, our agenda instead of theirs. And after you've gone over some questions, and Mary Ellen's going to talk about the different types of questions later, it's important to just kind of sit back and let them think about what they know, think about what they don't know, kind of think about how they're getting to the point that they want to be at, and what we can do to get them there. And it's super important to be able to sit in silence and just kind of let them marinate on what's been talked about. And that can be super hard because we're all helpers and we all like things to be fixed, and we like parents to feel like they're getting what they want out of it. So sometimes it feels like it's better to just give out a bunch of ideas. And we don't want to offer something up that they've already tried that hasn't been successful. And that's another really good reason to ask a whole lot of questions. And then the bottom line of all of this is that reflection really gives support in problem solving, and it's not so focused on feedback and ideas. And we have to be really open to the idea that a family is going to give us an answer that we're not expecting. So when we're doing those 1 to 5 kind of scenarios in the IFSP, and when we think something is really awful, how many times do parents come back and they're like, oh, it's fine. That's not a big deal. And we're thinking, oh my gosh, that's awful. That's what we need to be working on. But the parent's perspective is, that's not so bad. That's not my priority. And so we have to be ready and prepared for a family to come back with something that we're not expecting. It's not our job to lead to a decision. It's not our job to have an agenda of what we want to have done. We just kind of have to lead them and let them go. And now we're going to watch a little video about different types of feedback. Oops.
Very fluid, and so we'll use the questions as we naturally go throughout the conversation. Also fluid throughout the process would be the use of feedback, another characteristic of the coaching practices. And there are 4 types of feedback that people typically provide. One is affirmative feedback, where we're acknowledging what it is that they know and what it is that they're telling us. It sounds something like this: I see what you mean. I understand. Or, that seems really challenging for you. Evaluative feedback is where we do place a judgment or an evaluation of what it is that they're doing or telling us. So it's something like, that's a great idea. Or, I really like it when you get down on her level. Whenever we provide evaluative feedback, we just want to be sure that we follow it up with why it was good or why we liked it.
Dana, are we stopping the video?
Ideas, we absolutely can. Directive feedback is the type of feedback that we actually discourage coaches from using, because it's just all out telling the person what to do, making recommendations or suggestions before we find out what their priorities are, or what's important to them, or what they've already tried. We certainly wouldn't want to give ideas to a family member and the ideas be something that they've already tried and found weren't very successful. So the only reason we would provide directive feedback, just telling them what to do, is if it's a situation of clear, present, imminent danger. Safety issues will jump to being directive. Other than that, we're going to step back and ask them to analyze and find out what their ideas are, and then provide informative feedback. So this brings.
Mary Ellen, did you say
Yeah,
something?
the audio cut out for a little bit on that one.
Oh, it
Yeah,
did?
it cut out, I would say,
Well.
kind of around when he started talking about evaluative. So maybe about 19.
Well, let's just start it over just in case.
The process would be the use of feedback, another characteristic of the coaching practices. And there are 4 types of feedback that people typically provide. One is affirmative feedback, where we're acknowledging what it is that they know and what it is that they're telling us. It sounds something like this: I see what you mean. I understand. Or, that seems really challenging for you. Evaluative feedback is where we do place a judgment or an evaluation of what it is that they're doing or telling us. So it's something like, that's a great idea. Or, I really like it when you get down on her level. Whenever we provide evaluative feedback, we just want to be sure that we follow it up with why it was good or why we liked it. Another type of feedback that we provide is called informative feedback. We're sharing information, we're sharing ideas, or at that point we might be making suggestions. That's where we marry our ideas and their ideas. Now, whenever we provide informative feedback, we want to wait until we have the parent analyze and come up with alternatives first. But at that point, if we need to share additional ideas, we absolutely can. Directive feedback is the type of feedback that we actually discourage coaches from using, because it's just all out telling the person what to do, making recommendations or suggestions before we find out what their priorities are or what's important to them or what they've already tried. We certainly wouldn't want to give ideas to a family member and the ideas be something that they've already tried and found weren't very successful. So the only reason we would provide directive feedback, just telling them what to do, is if it's a situation of clear, present, imminent danger. Safety issues will jump to being directive. Other than that, we're going to step back and ask them to analyze and find out what their ideas are, and then provide informative feedback. So this brings.
So Dana had shared some information about how we approach our reflective questioning when we go into our family home, into our visits. And what we really want to do today is kind of focus on using those same thoughts that she shared about in the home visits with the way that we share them in primary coaching at our team meetings. So we're honing our skills to be reflective both at team meetings as well as in the home. And we're all still growing, and we're all still mastering our craft in many ways. Finding different parts of the questions to parallel in our team meeting as we do in home visits. Much of the things that Dana said about how we sometimes have our own agenda, or we already have the information, or we know the answer we're trying to get to, when we do primary coaching, aside from trying to be helpful and throwing out ideas, we also may ask a question in a way that sort of leads to the answer for that person to be thinking of without knowing all those dynamics. So thinking about the kind of feedback is really important when we listen to what Dathan had said there, which I thought was kind of helpful for me to remind myself of. I think a lot about reflection, but I don't necessarily always remember the parts about the feedback. And the feedback, we can go in there and be, like he said, affirmative, evaluative, informative, or directive. And depending on what you're talking with the family about, you might be jumping from one to the other through that visit, or you may find that your whole visit was about affirmative kind of information. It's really easy to jump around. And it's something that you should feel comfortable doing. I kind of like the way you put them in circles, because it's not a progression. It's a circle of thoughts and events that are happening so fast in your visit, in your thinking of your professional objectives, as well as where is this family at, and the dynamics that are happening in the home. So I think the one that stood out to me the most was, sharing of the informative, trying to be on the same page and marrying, as he says, the thoughts that we have from our professional position with the components of their day. So when he talks about affirmative, acknowledging what they know and understand, I think part of that needs to come from the way that we ask those reflective questions. When we ask reflective questions, we're asking so that we can get the parents to be more reflective, but also that we can listen to learn. What is the family's level of awareness of that event even happening in the moment? What is their awareness of how they responded to that event? Did that even seem to be on their radar as a glitch or a problem or a challenge, as a celebration? Did they totally miss that moment? Lots of times things are happening and the parents feeling so watched and hard on themselves that they miss the moments of celebration. So being affirmative in those moments, acknowledging what you've heard them say, often allows you to give the parent support and confidence, to build the parent's relationship with you and with their child. And I think it also helps when you do something like, that seems really challenging for you. And then use that pause time, which we tend to want to move on and give more empathy and perhaps suggestions. But by giving that pause time, it allows that family member or that teacher or that person that's with the child to take a moment to think, yeah, I guess it really was hard. And from that may come more reflection about how to move forward. Like a scenario that I've had is a dad's trying to teach his child how to speak Spanish, but he's the only one that speaks Spanish in the home. And it's an English speaking home, but he wants them to be bilingual. And, his awareness of the fact that the child still has to develop a language strategies and an interaction and a relationship with that dad needed to come into play in his awareness level. So when he would say something like, it's frustrating to me because my kids don't speak Spanish, and my answer was, I imagine that is challenging for you. Tell me a little bit more about how you try to make that happen. And so it kind of allowed me to find out what are they already doing, and then affirm his need to make that important. In the evaluative feedback, again, reflecting on listening to what they're saying, and then providing the feedback by using those reflective questions. Evaluative can be a judgment, especially if it comes to behaviors or sleep situations, or bottle feeding or breastfeeding, or independence, or any of the challenges that come with 2-year-olds. We might tend to give a statement that indicates our own bias on a way that we would approach that situation. So it's really hard to be in the moment thinking about, how do I give a reflective response? How do I give evaluative feedback without being judgmental? So kind of one of the things that I keep in mind, but again, I'm always working on, is being sure to follow up with why we thought it was good. So if we said, I really like the way you're using modeling with your child, well, hopefully the parent is understanding what we're saying by modeling at that point. But why do I like what they're doing when they're modeling with their child? Or I really like the way that you went with the direction of what your child was interested in, instead of having them come back to what we were doing. Well, why was that a helpful thing? Kind of giving them some opportunity to reflect on what happened in the moment when dad or mom went with the flow of the child, instead of bringing them back to the task or the activity that they were doing previously. It also, in the evaluative, allows you and the members that you're working with to look at, where are the families in their educational level of what we're trying to do. Do they remember where we started with our IFSP goals and outcomes, and what they thought was so important when we first came in? Where are they at in their development of understanding the progression of things that they and their child have come through and changed through their coaching strategies in the activities that they've embedded those evaluative statements in? Also, where are they in their attachment and their bonding with their child? So if we think a lot about some of the things that Leslie and others have taught us about temperament and personalities with children and parents, sometimes I've heard parents say, he's some negative things about their child because they're struggling with the personality differences, or with the challenges or the other issues going on for the family at the time. So trying to find a way to identify back to them, affirming, I heard what you said, let's evaluate in feedback, where are they at and how can we move forward with a reflective response? Basically, we're trying to build the parent's competency. We're trying to listen to learn when we're using those evaluative statements, and what and where the parent is in their knowledge and learning style. We often go in and think about where the child is at, but sometimes we have to take a step back when we do these evaluative and affirming statements and think about, what's going on for the parent, and am I really paying attention to their needs and supporting them in that direction? Another format of feedback that he talked about that I think we probably all use that affirmative a lot. We probably go to the evaluative throughout our visits with our families and with our team members. So in our primary coaching, same thing applies. When we're doing the evaluative, we want to ask questions like, tell me more about why this is a struggle for mom. I heard you say you've already tried this. What do you think could be next? So we might want to use those evaluative statements to support our team members in, hey, you're on the right path. You sound like you really have a lot of knowledge here. What are the things that you're looking for that we can help support you with? Same thing with the informative. We're basically trying to share information. So that's the part where we kind of, I feel we can all get kind of trapped and stumped with team meetings when somebody presents a primary coaching opportunity and we've sort of checked in or checked out because we're, oh, that's not my scope of interest, or that's not, that's a PT question, or I'm not sure how to respond to that. Or we are really checked in and we're really listening, but are we listening to automatically get to an answer for that person and share our information and share our ideas? Or are we being cognizant of asking the right kinds of reflective questions to get the person who's doing the primary coaching to share their thoughts and ideas, and then wed some of ours with them, like Dathan says, marry the ideas together. Kind of what are your next steps? Tell me what you're thinking would be helpful next. Or I know a lot of us ask, what have you tried? That's a good one to kind of get more of that informative response from our peers when we're coaching. Thinking about assimilating these into what situation, what activity, what dynamic in the home makes that really difficult. Have you seen it in other activities in the home? Is this the first time the family has expressed the concern to you? And if so, what have they tried already? So asking those kinds of questions in our primary coaching really allows that person who's sharing, hey, I've been doing this and this, I'm kind of stumped, or parents and I are looking for more support. If we ask those right informative questions, we can kind of support them without throwing a whole bunch of ideas at them that they might have already tried, assuming that maybe they not affirming for them that we know that they've already thought of the obvious. And sometimes we really haven't thought of the obvious. So finding a nice way to ask that question through a reflective, have you thought about what it looks like when you do this? Kind of would give them an opportunity to go a little deeper there. So pretty much, I think what Dana was talking about with feedback, when she mentioned a nice way to wed her idea with the family's idea about the pizza, was she thought about how to ask that question. And she said, what are other ways that we could make this pizza? So instead of suggesting that we make the pizza differently, she suggested that we think about using an action and an alternative way to create that pizza, and wed what the parent has already tried or thought about with some of her thoughts about where we should be going with that pizza. So that's a really nice way to be giving feedback as well as ask that reflective question. For an example, you guys are all familiar with, Dana, if you would pop up the at a glance one to share, please. You're all familiar with this at a glance reflective coaching questions for those of us that have been through it from the beginning with the Dathan and Melissa, and those that you've come through and been trained many times. This at a glance is what I use a lot, and I use now with my student, as well as when sometimes I'm working with families that I'm struggling to get them to coach and not couch, kind of get them a little bit more engaged and connected. I try to figure out where are they in their awareness? Where are they in their connections with their child? So we all have different dynamics when we talk with our families, as well as when we talk in primary coaching. And today, we're really trying to stick with primary coaching at team meetings, and then think about maybe another time doing a reflective lunch and learn that's specific to in the home, if that feels more helpful. Because like Dana said, from the feedback that Monica received, it's still an area that we're all trying to work towards fidelity and being better at using our reflective questions and our feedback during our primary coaching. So if we think about the awareness for somebody when they ask a question in primary coaching, they're obviously going to be telling us what they're aware of, what they've tried, what they know. Sometimes where we need to go is asking questions like, what ideas do you have for? Or saying something like, what could you do to try in other activities? So kind of allowing that person to stop and pause or give us feedback on, well, I've already tried this, this, and this. At the time that they're giving us that feedback on in response to our alternative type question, hopefully the rest of the team is also listening to what was asked, thinking about what the primary person had presented as the coaching question, and then trying to formulate in your own mind, has this already been addressed, or is there another way that I could maybe provide an analysis question like, how will you know that it's working if you try? How will mom or how will dad know if it's working if you try what you've described? What do you think will happen when? Um, some things. So the analysis are more how and what type questions that we want to kind of help each other think through when we're doing those primary coaching for our families that we're trying to dive a little deeper with. The action questions are pretty straightforward in that, what is your plan? What is your decision? What is your next step? And we always do that at the end of a primary coaching to make sure that we've all kind of heard what the concerns and challenges were. What have we learned from that dynamic that maybe we can take back to use in some of our own visits? And if I think about why we're trying to do these primary coachings in our team meetings, it's so that we can learn from each other in our different disciplines in terms of overall development, as well as in terms of being better coaches for each other and bringing some of those strategies and ideas into our own family visits. Um, so at a glance, I think is a really nice tool for us to try to remember to pull out sometimes, especially if you feel like you're not able to stay focused in a team meeting, or you feel like the team meeting is kind of going awry. It's helpful to all of us to have somebody that sort of asks a question to bring it back on task. Um, and to be an active listener, to find out what's already been spoken about, what does the person doing the primary coaching feel that they've gotten in the way of a response, and is there something else that I can add to that? So like one of the questions on the at a glance tips for reflective coaching questions, ask only one reflective question at a time. So sometimes we might, or I know I do sometimes, pepper a whole bunch of questions at once to try to get the parent to finally see what it is that I'm getting at. And when I do that, I'm not doing very good reflective questioning or actually paying attention to feedback. I'm just kind of going with my own agenda. I'm coaxing instead of coaching, like Dana had said, because I'm trying to get them to get to the point of what it was that I see was the root of their question. So we want to try to be mindful of not doing that. We also don't want to ask those grand tour questions that revisit a previous joint plan, like how are things going, like Dana said, because how are things going with what? Um, Always try to be cognizant of what our outcomes were. The awareness, analysis, alternative questions always precede informative feedback. And so basically that just means let's make sure that we're using these other kinds of questions before we go in and give them feedback to see, did they have any of their own reflection? Did they understand what was happening in the moment? How did they perceive what occurred in our visit that made sense to them, so that when we create that joint plan at the end of our visit or at the end of our primary coaching with our team, are they going to go back and make that practical? And is the in the family dynamic, are they going to make that be part of their interaction, or is it just going to be something we assigned and the person does not take it to heart and implement it because it's not a part of them? So I guess the idea that I'm trying to share here at using this at a glance is really helpful at team meetings to have in front of you, especially now that we're doing them on Zoom, and be helpful in the primary coaching moment to say, hey, I heard you say this, and I heard somebody else offer this. Tell me more about what you think that would look like in this family, or Why do you think that mom is struggling with these situations? So kind of helping by asking those questions in primary coaching is super um, productive. And these cheat sheets in front of you would be helpful. The roadmap review, Dana, if we could switch to that one. The roadmap for reflection is now on in the P drive. So if you want to take a glance at this, it's kind of a nice visual for you to think about the flow of a coaching conversation. So again, we're trying to build our fidelity in asking these kinds of questions in team meeting. But anything we do in team meeting only gives us more practice to do in the homes and vice versa. So if you look at the circle there, it talks about find out the priority of the family or the priority of the primary coachee. In some instances, the practitioner will raise an issue and ask permission to discuss it with the family. Well, that's pretty much what we're doing at primary coaching. Here's my issue. I want to discuss this with you. So we're going to want to ask some more informative and clarifying questions to get more information. We're going to want to find out what has the provider already tried, what has the family already tried, what is it that we can do to support this? What were the past solutions? What's worked? What's not worked? Those kinds of these little blocks help you go back to that at a glance and think, okay, what has worked and what has not worked? Brings us to the alternative type questions. What do you need to know? What else have you tried? So if we think about where are we on this little continuum of this roadmap, when you get to the find out more, think of where those questions would come from, the alternative type. Find out what other ideas the family has done to solve these questions or concerns, or the provider has already tried. That's an analysis. What have you already tried? What does it look like when you do? Those are those types of analysis questions. So I think for me, the one that's been the most helpful is to say, okay, I get the idea of reflection, I get the idea of feedback, but if I want to be purposeful in using them and being actively listening to my team member sharing at primary coaching, I want to think about where are they on this roadmap so that I can kind of look down at my little questions and think, what would be a helpful question to ask to move to that next space on the roadmap and help them get down to the follow-up circle at the bottom there. So we kind of go across all of these, explore advantages and disadvantages of trying something different. That's looking at alternatives as well as taking action, providing information about the others in consideration of what their needs are. So that's an awareness question, thinking about the learning style of that person, the level of knowledge, the opportunity to coach, the time they already have in a relationship with the family that they're presenting information to us about, maybe still brand new. And so they might need sort of those beginning steps to help them think through. And it might be they've had a really good relationship and been working on something for a long time and feel like they're just stuck on how to move through this next area of concern that they're primary coaching about. So knowing that that's their background and their knowledge, helping them think through that analysis and those action questions, which finally brings us down to finding out what other supports the provider is using. Sometimes I hear, so are you asking for support from another provider? Because sometimes that's not a clear question. And maybe they hadn't really thought, yeah, I guess I'm not just problem solving. I do need another brain out there to look at this differently. So that would be a really nice question that leads us to that solution. It's at the bottom green square where it says, find out what other supports the family, i.e. PSP, might need to achieve that plan. Which brings us to, okay, what is your plan going forward? Which is always asked at the end of our primary coaching. Much like we do with our families when we're doing the joint plan. Anybody have any questions or thoughts about how they're using that or aha moments that they have? Here's where we're giving that quiet pause that we don't do very well. So one other piece of helpful resource is on the back of this roadmap to reflective conversations is a form that looks like what Dana's scrolling to now. gives a little description about the roadmaps for reflection, how we can use them in our primary coaching, as well as in our coaching and family visits. And then, of course, the shapes and colors kind of give you an idea of where to draw your eye in terms of looking at. The purple circle is more about what triggers and locations happen. What are the that spark the conversation? How does the concern come up? And then in the green area, it helps us think about using those analysis and alternative questions, as well as the awareness questions, to go a little bit deeper to help the parent and or the coachee in the primary coaching opportunity think about what they already know, and think beyond what that one question is, so that they can already realize what we've tried, what we've thought about, or, hey, I really feel I need that extra person in there. So are they asking then for an alternative, and what is their action plan? The yellow box kind of draws your eye to indicating an opportunity to provide feedback. So that's where that part about giving affirmative feedback, evaluative feedback, or informative feedback is helpful. Sometimes the direct feedback, like Dathan said, is necessary, but again, it's more imminent danger, as he put it, which hopefully we don't see that very often. It's a part where we try not to do the telling of what we saw happen, what we noticed was different, because then we're not teaching the parent to be reflective and own the changes and think through the alternatives and the analysis. And then eventually you get to that pink part, which if you just kind of look at those at a glance, it helps you realize that you're summarizing, helping the parent summarize, or helping that primary coachee summarize, what did you hear? How is this helpful? What's your plan to go forward? Much like we would do with our families in our family visits. So what we were hoping to do at this point that was make it be a little bit more practical and uh, I guess give us all like an aha moment to say, boy, this is something I really think I could work a little harder at, or pay a little more attention to, maybe in a family that you know you're kind of plateauing with, or one you're just getting started with, or one you're feeling super comfortable with, that you want to really see, how am I doing in my fidelity of using reflective coaching and feedback, or how am I doing when I go to our next team meeting, and being supportive and being an active listener and asking the questions to the person, the PSP that needs the coaching. So we have some thoughts about primary coaching. We put up some scenarios that came from some of our team meetings that were actually primary coaching opportunities. And what we thought we would do is just sort of do some breakout room for about 5 minutes. Is that right, Dana? I think about 5 minutes we were thinking. And with that, there's some questions here that we want you to, you'll get assigned a question or a primary coaching situation in your breakout room. And what would be really helpful is to really think about, where are you on your continuum of learning and building your fidelity and using reflective questions and feedback to our team members and or in your home dynamics that would apply to this situation. And then when we come back, just maybe list off 3 or 5 questions that you feel were helpful in digging deeper into responding to this primary coaching scenario.
So looks like that we've got about 30 people. I'm gonna break us up into 6 different groups. And we'll have about 5 minutes. Whatever your breakout group number is, do the corresponding scenario. Okay, I think we're in the same group.
Oh, there's
So-
Dana.
Somebody asked me for help.
Yes, we don't know what our question is.
Oh, you don't?
We
Well,
can't see paper. We're number 5.
I got it. Can anyone support me with Jenny's eating? Mom would like her to feed herself.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
And
look,
she eats well when mom feeds her, right?
hold on. What did you say?
And I kind of remember, I think it said Jenny eats well when mom feeds her, but she doesn't feed herself.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have fun.
I meant to close the damn box and I hit leave my room.
Recorded.
Oh.
It's okay, Megan.
Well, hello, Amy. Everyone.
Okay, I believe we should all be back.
So before we start sharing what our experiences were from doing this little breakout, some of the thoughts about why we wanted to set this up was to, one, just give us all an opportunity to think about, how do I ask questions in primary coaching? What is the benefit of asking that kind of question? And what is the benefit for the person that is asking for the primary coaching when they have these questions asked back? What is it that their takeaway is? What is it that are they being affirmed? Are they having an aha moment because I hadn't thought about that yet? How are these reflective questions and feedback helpful for the person asking the question as well as the whole team? So Dana, do you want us to just go ahead and have group one share their 3 or 5 questions?
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
Okay. So there was a lot to unpack from this question, but we kind of came up with what have you tried at home and daycare? Can you tell us about what you're seeing? What does mom want the engagement to look like during play? How does mom engage in play now? Why do you think that you need an OT, or why do you think it's a sensory preference issue? And then finally, do these issues happen all day long during other routines, or is it just happening during playtime?
So can you guys elaborate a little more about what kinds of questions you feel those were, and how that may have been helpful in terms of deep digging deeper for this question?
I don't know, Mary Ellen. We didn't really talk about that a lot.
Okay, so I heard a lot of awareness questions. I heard of a lot of alternative questions. I heard some action questions when it comes to bringing an OT, and what do you think about that? I heard some analysis questions in terms of the sensory motor component. So I think you guys kind of nailed it with, thinking about all different types of questions. Not that the person asking this primary coaching question doesn't already have some of that knowledge, all of that knowledge in their head, but maybe stepping away from it by being asked a question from someone that doesn't have hands-on with
No,
that
we just kind of felt like it was like we kind of even asked the question of, do you even have this discussion when you're clearly asking for an OT? And we kind of came away with deciding that we would felt like it was beneficial to have the discussion because it might bring a different provider to the table, like just based on the discussion of what was going on or what the sensory preferences were, or like somebody who may not have initially thought, hey, this would be a good kiddo for me, might think like, hey, this would be a great family for me.
I like that thought, Trina, because it also gives everybody in the on the team a learning opportunity. So some of us may not have heard that kind of information before about sensory integration or about thinking through what it looks like in different activities of the day. So I think it's always a learning opportunity, not just for the person who's doing the primary coaching, but for the whole team to have some takeaways. So when we come and ask our questions, we have some more thoughts in our mind about how we want to phrase that question to get that support. And I think you said something really important too, Trina, about if we just come to the meeting and say, I need an OT or an SLP, and someone says, I'll do it, well, then nobody has really learned from that dynamic of that primary coaching moment. And so we don't necessarily need to spend 5 minutes on all of that, but maybe why do you need a SLP, or why do you need a PT or speech or ECSC or nutritionist? What is it that brings you to that request? And because then it's a learning moment for everybody. And it's a thought process for the person asking, well, really, why do I? And making it purposeful. So great reflection, you guys. Number 2.
Okay, so number 2 was, does anyone have ideas to support more language for Charlie? And we came up with, well, first of all, there was discussion just about whenever we do primary coaching, a lot of awareness information is already given, but that sometimes if there isn't enough, we'll ask some more awareness questions like, what does he do when he wants to communicate? And what does that look like? I think those are awareness questions. I'm not entirely sure.
Yes, you're on it.
Another question that we came up with was, why are you or parents feeling that what you've tried so far hasn't worked? And I think that's probably more of an analysis question. Another question is kind of twofold. How does the child's development match with what the parents' expectations are? I think that would be probably more of an analysis question. And then the last one, what are some barriers or reasons why this may be challenging, which could really kind of tie into that developmental piece too.
And be an alternative and an awareness question. Great.
Okay.
Nailed it, guys. That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that one, like you started out great with that, Megan, because it really doesn't have enough information. So before we start throwing in ideas at the person asking for the primary coaching, we want to do those kinds of questions that you just highlighted. Again, for a learning opportunity and to help that person feel supported. They may, perhaps that question was asked that way because they really didn't know, like, I'm stuck and this is all I can think to ask. And by us asking those reflective questions back, gets the person asking for primary coaching to take a minute to listen to the question and think deeper about what it is that they truly need to service that family the best. So number 3.
For number 3, our question was, what are some strategies or ideas to expand beyond Joey's hyper-focused interest of letters and numbers while still following his lead? So some of the questions we thought about are, what other toys does he enjoy? And what have you tried to get him interested in other toys? What does hyper-focused on letters and numbers look like? And then have there been other things that he's been hyper-focused on?
So you could ask what kinds of questions. Does anything pop in your head quickly?
No.
Okay. You asked 3 different kinds. The first, and I think this is the part that we all know to ask these kinds of questions, but we're not really sure what kind of question it is. And the benefit of knowing what kind of question it is, it helps you dive deeper in your visits with the families or dive deeper in the visit with primary coaching to say, am I really getting to the heart of what's being addressed or concerned? Or am I even acknowledging where the person is at in their learning or their readiness to make this connection? So your first one was an awareness one. Your second one was an analysis one, and your third one was an alternative one. So like spot on, you said, what have you tried? That's an awareness one right off the bat to give you information about what's already been out there rather than restating the obvious. So it's allowing the family to feel, or the PSP person presenting to feel empowered that, hey, we know you got this. Let's figure this out together. That marrying of the feedback that Dathan had talked about. So group number 4, who wants to share?
Mary Ellen, I didn't take notes, so I thought you were.
Okay, I'd be happy to. Just
share
giving,
our questions. I didn't write them down.
just giving that pause time in case someone else wanted to. No problem. So we had some really great discussion. Ours was, what are additional strategies to help Paige pick up her food, bring it to her mouth independently? That was the question. She touches and picks up anything, but will not bring it to her mouth. She is a great eater when mom feeds her from her hand or with a utensil. So some of the questions that we thought about there was, we have a lot of information. There's some already descriptive information that has been provided. So what other prompts has mom tried to encourage Paige to eat independently? So we want to already find out, what has she tried, or from the person either presenting this or us talking to the parent, what other alternatives have been tried? So that's an alternative question, as well as an awareness question, awareness of what's been tried. Alternative, what have you thought to try? What would mom want Paige eating, or what would mom want Paige eating independently to look like? So when we asked that, it's sort of like, well, I don't know, I guess we didn't think about that. She just said she wants her to eat independently. Okay, but is it okay if Paige gets messy? Is it okay if Paige is allowed to do it independently? Is it okay if mom plays with the food while Paige eats? What are those awareness and analysis type question going to show us about that? And the third one was, why does mom think she won't eat? Or why does mom think she won't self-feed? So has mom or the provider that's asking the question have an awareness of, why is this happening? Instead of, we just want her to self-feed, what is the analysis of that question in terms of what's going on, and what do we need to consider in order to make a plan going forward? Group 5.
Okay, ours was, can anyone support me with Jenny's eating? Mom would like her to feed herself. And our first questions were, can you tell me more about what that looks like when you feed Jenny, and also what it looks like when she tries to feed herself? What do you think the differences are between when you feed her versus when she is self-feeding, or when mom feeds her versus her self-feeding? And then kind of, what do you think doing well with, what does mom think doing well with feeding looks like? Sorry, I've got a hungry cat. And then lastly, what do you know about when kids first start eating? Because we all know, we all have different knowledge.
So Deirdre, do you want to share what you think those kinds of questions were? You guys were grabbing all kinds of different ones there as well.
Well, I think some awareness and some analysis, maybe what the differences are. I'm not sure what the other ones were. Those are my 2 that I think.
I think I heard an alternative one in there when you were asking what else they would like it to look like, or have tried. Have tried is an awareness, but it's also an alternative. So these questions aren't always just one or the other. They can be one or both, or a mix of several, because it's allowing them, the provider who's asking the question and coaching, or the parent who we're asking the question to, an opportunity to be reflective about, I don't know, I hadn't thought of that yet. Let me think of another action that I want to try, or let me think of an alternative that I want to try, or now that I have the awareness and I've tried these alternatives, what's next? So it's not a linear progression that we think of these reflective questions in. It's more the circular, where we're grabbing it at different times throughout our visits or in primary coaching. So someone might be asking an awareness question, but the next one, from what I heard from all of you from this exercise, was awareness sometimes needs to be first, so we get more information. And then there's alternatives or analysis questions to help the person then get to the action. So just be thinking about those kinds of things, I guess, to help us all work a little bit better towards fidelity. I think we are doing a great job considering how we're always evolving and changing, and the dynamics of our family situations and Zoom and not Zoom and all of that that's come into play, make reflective questioning and coaching something that sometimes we just make happen and we don't pay attention to why or how we're doing with it. So the one of the things we also wanted to share was we have a self-reflection quiz that we thought if you all take that at some point in time for yourselves and look at it, it will give you a nice, I guess, opportunity to give yourself feedback as well as be reflective about, oh, sorry, number 6 didn't go yet. Sorry, I'm a little number impaired.
I was so excited to do
Sorry,
ours.
for some reason I was thinking we had 5. So excuse me, Casey, please share.
Casey, do you want to go?
No,
Or you
Nate,
want me to do it?
you jotted down the notes, so I'll let you take
Okay.
it.
Okay, so here, let me pull my thing up first. Ours was kind of just kind of open. It just said eats purees and has constipation, likes bananas. So we started off with some awareness questions just to get an idea of like what exactly was going on. You know, what purees are they eating? When and how much bananas are they eating? And what does that constipation look like, you know, to the parents? And then I feel like our next one is kind of a awareness / analysis question. What is the family currently doing to address the constipation, and is it working or is it not working? And then our last one was more of an alternative question maybe, which is, you know, what would the family like to do differently? Because if you think about it, there's a lot of ways you can address constipation, both with like diet and or you know, behavior, or medically with like, you know, so, or making an appointment with the doctor. So, you know, that question I felt like was good because then we can kind of figure out like what the family prefers and what kind of things they like to do and how they want to address it. You know, that do they not want to upend everything that they're eating? Do they not want to stop bananas? So yeah, so those were our 3 questions. And one thing we also talked about, Casey was saying, you know, it was nice to do this because we also have to remember that even if it's not, you know, within our scope of practice, it's still really easy to ask those reflective questions because we're all able to do that. We all have those same skills. And just because we don't know suggestions to give doesn't mean that we can't help that process along by asking the questions.
That's a great reflection, and I appreciate you guys sharing that because it I think you were spot on with the types of questions you said they were, Nadine, as far as the awareness and the alternatives and then the analysis one. And I think you were speaking, you know, to how we would manage that with the family. And if the provider was asking this in primary coaching, I think the provider would be also sharing what have they already tried. So that would be a good question to have asked in that primary coaching, because then they would share what they've already tried. And what is it that they want to try next? What are the parents' comfort level and feeling about maybe what's been tried for the constipation, or introducing different fruits, rather than sort of jumping right to I need a Dana in there, because to Casey's point, we all have learned from each other so well that we're such cross-discipline early interventionists now, that it makes it kind of encouraging and feel good to know that you can sometimes come up with a coaching question to lead that conversation about nutrition, even though, you know, we've learned from the best, but we aren't her. So kudos to Dana for teaching us. And I like that reminder. So here's the little at a glance kind of reflective quiz, so to speak, for yourselves. I think like when I looked at it, I thought, oh, here's some areas that I could certainly pay attention to a little bit more with certain families, or when I'm reflecting with my student, or just on my own. We all sometimes come out of a home and feel, oh, wow, that was a really rough session. Well, why was that rough? Was I off my game? Did I not ask the right questions? Was there so much going on there that I couldn't keep my focus? Did I have my own focus and the parent didn't stay on focus with me? And therefore, I'm not really doing my coaching very well. So I like this little questionnaire that we had gotten, to just kind of look at it for yourselves. When a parent and colleague asks me questions, how do you respond? Do you always have an answer? Do you freak out if you don't know the answer? Do you avoid the question because you feel like you don't know? Or we work together to discover the answer, or use other resources. So it's a good one to kind of ask yourself when you have those visits, or you even have a good visit and you think, what made that go well? Number two, when a care provider shares an idea with me, do I immediately compare that idea to my own values, beliefs, and preferences? And I think we're all really mindful of being aware that our own biases are something we try hard not to bring into our coaching, but we are human and sometimes we have to step back and remind ourselves of that. I evaluate how realistic the idea actually is. So a parent wants a kid to potty train and they're not even talking or walking yet. Well, is that realistic? Who knows? But let's ask those questions to help the parent come to that conclusion. I consider the idea in light of the care provider's intended outcome, or I immediately agree or disagree. So agree or disagree kind of gives that evaluative feedback. Why are we doing that? So it's not necessarily a bad thing to do, but why? Educate the person and understand. Number three, when working with a care provider or a colleague, I follow the care provider or a colleague's lead during a conversation to determine how I can be helpful. That's a good thing. And sometimes, it's helpful to also ask reflective questions. So you're not just going along with it, but you're helping all of you think. I focus on her issue at the moment and then go back to my plan. So are we actively listening and implementing what we think we heard? I get frustrated when they cannot stay on task. So is that because we have our own agenda and we're not really in the moment with the person or the family we're interacting with? Or I stick to my agenda or plan. Well, how is that going to work and carry over when it comes to the joint plan? So thinking about, well, when you do those things or how you answer this, how does that apply to the situation you're in? When people describe me, they tend to use words like supportive, encouraging, and caring, busy, rushed, overworked, opinionated, directed, and to the point, sympathetic, soft-hearted, and indulgent. I think we can all be any one of those on any given day or in any given moment. So thinking about where we fall in that when we're interacting with our colleagues at a primary coaching, if it feels chaotic or you just can't stay focused and be listening, then maybe try to learn something from the exchange, but maybe not be participating verbally if you're having one of those type of days. When people describe me, they tend to use, when working with care providers and colleagues, I tend to tell people what I think they want to hear. I share complete and unbiased information. I give only positive feedback, or I wait to share difficult information as long as I possibly can. So those answers can all be appropriate at different times. Just thinking about in the moment or during primary coaching, what would be the most helpful way to respond to a colleague when they're presenting a question. And if you're feeling like one of those is not going to be of support or encouragement or adding to their competence, then let it lie. Because what we're ultimately working towards is being competent in the way we support each other as well as how we coach, maintaining our focus on what are the objectives of either our visit or the question being asked and the objective that we have in responding, being adaptable to what's being said or shared and leaving our biases out of that, being flexible and open to trying, obviously being caring. I think that goes without words amongst all of us, and being honest. All kind of leads to a supportive team and constructive feedback and growth and fidelity for being using the coaching model to the best that we can. So I hope these tools are helpful to you guys. And like I said, when I started out with the coaching, I had a little cheat sheet and I would keep my questions there. And as I grew in doing it, I started adding more. And then all of a sudden, like we coach our families, it becomes intuitive. And sometimes we just have our script, but our script oftentimes needs a little cleaning up or maybe fine tuning or maybe a little dusting off. And so the intent of this was just to share some of those ideas and kind of bring it all back into the forefront. Thoughts, feedback, questions? Dana? Anybody?
I think that one, just to kind of piggyback on what you just said, earlier this week when Mary Ellen and I were chatting, she had a really nice idea of writing down like 5 or so questions, like even if you jot them down in a notebook that you have with you, or have them in your phone, or on your, on a little sticky pad on your Surface screen, like 4 or 5 questions to just kind of prompt you, like things that you feel like could be easily used, so it starts to become more second nature, going into the other types of questions that maybe we don't use as often as we used to or should.
So I was saying to my breakout group before that I would like to practice using reflective questions more often. And team meetings they always feel safe to me. So practicing them during primary coaching is really helpful. But it's kind of hard when you're in the moment and you're like, oh, should I say something? Should I not? But I was saying maybe we should do something where we like put everybody's name in a hat, and then you like pick out a name, and like that person's up for asking a reflective question during primary coaching. And then this way it doesn't matter like what discipline you are, or what the question is, you're up. You have to come up with a question. But I'm sure some people wouldn't like that. But I think it'd feel good to me, because then I feel like I wouldn't be the only one like thinking, ooh, I'm going to ask a stupid question.
Well, I challenge you, Nadine, to ask that question and know that it's not stupid, because no matter what question you ask, somebody else was thinking something similar, or was grateful to learn from it. So ask away. We all need to do a better job of supporting each other by asking more questions. Well, thank you all for sharing your lunch hour with us, and hopefully the information will that you find on the P. Dana, do we have it listed under resources? Under it's under resources, but what is it under the heading? Lunch and Learn? She's looking. You're muted, Dana.
Sorry. There's a tab that says primary service provider model. And there's a lot of resources in there. And then the stuff that I emailed everybody was what we use today. And then there's also the coaching log from way back when. Monica had mentioned that if you guys feel like that would be helpful, you could dig that back out, to kind of just reflect with yourself on how sessions are going and how questions are working out for you.
Or find a peer or a mentor to go over it with you. And one of the ways we've used the coaching log in the past, especially for the new folks that have joined us, is to record your visit. And you can record just a section of it if you feel like you're not that great at the wrap up and creating a joint plan, because it's your plan and not the family's plan, or you're creating the plan and you come back and nothing's changed. You might want to record that part of it to see, well, how am I doing in creating this plan? Am I using good reflective questions to get the parent to create that joint plan between visits? Or maybe in the middle, am I talking too much? Am I listening well? Am I asking good reflective questions? And you don't have to video or tape. Some people taped it on their Service Pros, taped it on their phone. Go back and listen to it and write down what you asked, what they said, and then kind of go back and kind of reflect on, wow, what kind of questions am I stuck on a lot? Or what kind of questions have I not even thought to try? And how is that working in my visit? So the coaching log can be a helpful tool for self-reflection and self-improvement. So our team meetings will get more lively now, right, everyone? Good to see you all. Have a good day.